Hello, it is Friday, May 3rd, and I am here to do a Friday Reads. It's been a while since I've checked in, and I have finished 4 books I'd like to tell you about. I'd also like to talk about what I'm currently reading and one book that I DNF'd that was a buddy read. So I'm going to start with the books that I finished. The first book I'd like to talk about is called The Beautiful Visit by Elizabeth Jane Howard. This was published in 1950, and it is her first published novel. Elizabeth Jane Howard was a British novelist who published her works in the 1950s through, I think, the 1970s or 80s. She was a force of nature. I love her writing style. I have read 2 of her other novels and her autobiography, which I absolutely loved. The autobiography was just full of stories of celebrity, people that she knew in the literary world, and her upbringing, her girlhood, and then her marriages, and just all the things that happened to her and how she became a famous novelist back then. The Beautiful Visit, Elizabeth Jane Howard's first novel, is about an unnamed narrator who is a young girl. She's about 15 or 16 when the book starts, and she is in a family that is not a happy family. It's not a happy marriage for her parents. Her father seems to be depressed. He's a music composer and isn't doing well financially. His compositions aren't being well received, and he has taken to having to teach piano lessons. She has 2 older brothers and an older sister, so she is the youngest. And the family just doesn't seem connected. They don't have that much in common. They don't support each other well, and it just feels like a cold and somewhat melancholy place to be. And the father is very conservative and conventional and wants his daughters to, be ladies and not have any kind of ambitions outside of being in the house. So the oldest daughter is invited by a rich family to come to the country and spend 2 weeks with them at Christmas, and she doesn't want to go. So the unnamed narrator is told by her parents that she should go. Her mother really wants her to go. And while the narrator is somewhat excited about this, she's intrigued. She wants to do anything to get away from the house. She's also incredibly scared, but all in all, she ends up going, and it changes her life because she's exposed to a whole new way of living, to all these different vibrant, colorful personalities, people who are unfettered by money. So they have plenty of money to do whatever their hearts desire, and she meets all kinds of different people and sees the interactions between people, and she has her first kiss, and all of these things happen to her while she is away in the country. And then she has to come back, and it's awakened in her a spirit and a desire to do something besides just be in the home. The summer comes, and she has been going to the library, and she is invited by the librarian to work there for the summer. Her father will not allow this, so she accepts that. And so she keeps trying to venture out of the home. And then all of a sudden, it's time for World War I. And so that changes everything. There's a tragedy in her family, and the whole novel, it's her just trying to figure out who she is in the midst of this historic event, and what she can do without having been trained to do anything. How is she going to make a life that doesn't necessarily involve getting married? And so it's an exploration of her psyche and her intellect and her ambition. And it was just delightful. This was a great debut. I really enjoyed it. It would be a good book club pick, I think, because there's a lot to talk about. And also, I just really, really liked the voice of the narrator. So it was definitely a hit. Another book that I finished in April is called A Change of Climate by Hilary Mantel, and is the story of a couple they are in a kind of a small village in England, and Their parents are very religious, especially the husband's parents are extremely religious, and they want him to be a missionary. And he ends up going to South Africa, and he marries this woman. So they are very young. They don't know each other very well. And as soon as they are married, they are swept off to South Africa to provide aid to a community there. Now, it's 1955, and apartheid rules had just been written and implemented. And so they are witnessing the systematic, segregation of black and white South Africans, and the incredible amount of restrictions that are placed on the black community there, and the dehumanization essentially of them, and their illegality of just existence. I mean, they are completely cut off from the white population, and they are not allowed to learn, read. They can't have property. They are completely restricted. And so this missionary couple who is there are sympathetic to the black community and rankle the powers that be, and they actually end up getting sent to prison for a short period of time because of their quote-unquote political activities. They are exiled to Botswana, and events arise that are shadowed throughout the novel. I mean, the novel starts off when they have returned to England. Years and years later, they have returned to England. But the events of their exile reverberate in their lives, although they aren't talked about. And so you see mostly the dynamics of the marriage itself, and how the secrets of the past are bubbling and finally erupt in a way that changes both of the people in the couple and their children that have arisen or who were born since they got back. And so all of these secrets kind of are just bubbling under the surface. So I think with the dynamics between the characters, the writing was really strong. I desperately wanted to know what the secret was and what happened. And it was a very well written and plotted novel, and you can see Hilary Mantel's writing talent throughout. So if you didn't like her historical fiction, you might possibly like fiction about the family, the marriage, and the political strife that was happening in South Africa. I also finished James by Percival Everett. Everyone on BookTube seems to have read this book or is reading it now. I think I liked it just as much as everyone else did. I listened to the audiobook, which was narrated by Dominic Hoffman. He did an excellent job of bringing the character of James to life. I'm sure everyone knows the premise of this book, that it's a retelling of Huckleberry Finn, but from the perspective of Jim, the slave. So it is a first-person narrative. You definitely get inside his head. You get to see there's so many different ideas and code switching between being a slave and trying to do anything to appease the very fragile egos of the white owners, and the entire society is structured much like the South African restrictions of apartheid, just the systematic racism and economic structure that does not allow for equality in any way at that time. I did not read Huckleberry Finn. I knew enough about the premise, and I may have even read it when I was a kid. I just knew enough about it that I didn't need to read it in order to read James. I know that other people have said, it really does, they complement each other, and I'm sure they do, but I just wanted to read James, and that's what I did. So I thought it was amazing. Just a really powerful, emotional, and affecting novel. And it was a book that's ending really knocked it out of the park. I did a buddy read with Priscilla from Evening Reader. This is the second in the Plainsong trilogy, and this book has some recurring characters from Plainsong in Eventide, but it's just about more different characters and how they interact. It's about loneliness, it's about loss, grieving, and coming together as community to heal those maladies of modern life. It takes place in the 80s. Again, the McPherson brothers are prominent in this story. The Bachelor brothers, who are in their late 50s or 60s. In Eventide, humanity, charity, acts of compassion all come together, but in the face of just some really terrible people and terrible circumstances and poverty and mental illness and just a variety of things that we all see happen in everyday life. So I thought it was fabulous. I don't know if I loved it quite as much as I loved Plainsong, but I did really want to know what was going to happen to the characters. So it was really a good buddy read, and I'm glad we did it. I had one DNF, and this was supposed to be a buddy read with Sean, the book maniac. I ended up reading half of this book. It's called Johnny. Well, no, I think in England it was called Johnny, I Hardly Knew Ye, but in the version I have is called I Hardly Knew You, and it's about a woman who is probably in her late 30s, early 40s, again, considered older, and is sitting in prison awaiting trial as she has murdered her lover, who was her son's friend. So she had an affair with a young man, and for some reason, because she was unhinged and losing her mind and was having a midlife crisis and all of these things, she was having an affair with this boy and then murders him. So I never got to the point to find out why she murdered him, because I read the first half and Sean said, I am not reading this. And I said, thank you. I'm so relieved that we don't have to read this, because it was just, there was some good writing in it, but I, in general, am tired of Edna O'Brien's theme of these women who just are constantly losing their minds and are very self-destructive and doing things that are not good for their mental health. And this is a theme over the last several novels. And it was also a theme in many of the short stories that we read when we read. The first book we read together was the collected short stories of Edna O'Brien. And there was a chunk of stories that came right out of this era of her writing that were just insufferable after a period of time when you'd seen the same themes over and over and over again. So we have abandoned our project to read the entire backlist of Edna O'Brien in chronological order. I loved her early writing about Irish girlhood. I would highly recommend those books. And I also loved her memoir. I thought it was really good and elucidated a lot of the themes from the novels and the short stories. So, still a fan of Edna O'Brien, but not a completist, and I'm completely okay with that. All right. What am I reading now? Karl Anderson did a really good video the other day about the death of Paul Auster. And I had read many early Paul Auster novels. There was a time in my life when I would read everything he wrote. I kind of fell off from reading those again because when I got to Sunset Park, it was a book I was really, really enjoying, and it just ended before the plot had worked itself out. I mean, it ended so abruptly that it just like someone had torn out the final quarter of the book, and we never got to find out what happened to the character. I don't remember the details now, but I remember just being stunned that the book ended in such a weird place without having resolved the conflict of the novel. So kind of gave up on Paul Auster for a while, but watching Eric's video reminded me of how much I liked the books that I did read that I liked. I consider my favorite Paul Auster book The Book of Illusions, which is about a man who's having a mental health crisis of some kind, and he becomes obsessed with the films and the life of a silent film actor from the 1920s. And so it's his quest to find a missing film and to find out what happened to the actor who disappeared from the face of the earth. And so I've decided to pick that up again, and I'm listening to the audiobook, which is narrated by Auster himself. So far I've listened to about an hour of it, I think, and I remember the propulsion of the narrative and how well he is able to capture things. And I'm also really drawn and attracted to novels that talk about the artwork, the art of film, and describing film. The Kiss of the Spider Woman by Manuel Puig, I read in college, and that was also retellings of films. And I love that that technique of using text to describe something that's a visual art. And so the whole second chapter of this book, The Book of Illusions, is the narrator describing the plots and the visual effects of these silent films by this actor. So that's really working well for me right now. I think it maybe goes off the deep end at some point. I don't know. I don't remember all of the particulars because I haven't read it since 2005, so almost 20 years ago. But I want to see if it really still is a favorite novel or a 5-star read, or if things have changed in me or changed in the text or whatever. So that's really interesting. I picked up The Searcher by Tana French. This is the first in the Cal Hooper series. I know that The Hunter is the second in the series that came out this year, and I had never read The Searcher, so I'm reading that. And so far, yeah, I'm really enjoying it. I'm still reading the Penguin Book of the Modern American Short Story by John Freeman. There have been some really knockout stories in here that I have not ever read before. Some of the stories I have read, like The Things They Carried is in there, so sometimes I will skip a story if I start reading it. I've read The Things They've Carried. I liked it, but it's not something I'm in the mood for. So if I come to a story that's just not working for me, off I go to the next story. But there was a really good story by Jamaica Kincaid. The stories are just the last 50 years when it came out. Came out in 2021, so it's 50 years of short stories. It doesn't rehash William Faulkner, Eudora Welty, all the stories that are always included in anthologies of best American short stories. So they're more modern and they are more diversified. There are a more variety of authors in there. So this is really a nice sampling of American fiction from the last 50 years. And I think that's all I have for now. I do want to recommend a podcast if you like podcasts. Julia Louis-Dreyfus has a podcast called Wiser Than Me that came out last year, and now it's in its second season. This season so far, she has these really in-depth conversations with women who are older. This season includes Bonnie Raitt, Billie Jean King, Beverly Johnson, and Sally Field so far. And I just love the way that they talk about just anything related to their careers and the obstacles they may or may not have had in building their careers, and just the idea of being an older woman and having a lot of things to say. And it's highly entertaining. I love Julia Louis-Dreyfus and her vibe, and she's just like so in awe and interested in talking to these people. And then at the end of each episode, she calls her mother, who's in her 90s, and then they rehash a little bit of what happened in the interview, which is really just a nice touch and a nice way to bring her mom into the podcast. Anyway, when you're going for a long walk and you want to listen to something that's really compelling, this might be something you enjoy. It's called Wiser Than Me. And I think that's all I have to say for now. I don't have huge plans for the month of May other than just I need to read Horse by Geraldine Brooks for a book club. And yeah, I don't have huge plans. I just want to finish the books I'm reading and just kind of enjoy what's happening in my reading life as the summer is encroaching. So please let me know in the comments something about what you're reading or anything you would like to say or not. And thanks so much. And I really look forward to seeing you in the next video. Bye.